And to be fair, I don't fully 100% understand method 2. I have learned method 1.
So the reason why I'm even doing this video is because I got this comment on one of my videos about 12 days ago, and it is from Wild Bill 1519, and he says, yesterday, Carrie at Home posted a video using her whiteboard and mentioned 2 ways of figuring STR on item lookups on eBay. I get the feeling she must have seen your video featuring her. She had method 1, the way it's done now, and method 2, the correct way shown. She went over each method step by step and asked if anyone could explain to her, etc., etc. So I didn't really know what Wild Bill was exactly talking about, so I had to go check out the video myself.
So there's 2 different methods. The method 1 is the more common, easy way that resellers use. It can determine how hot or not hot the market is right now, and it can also answer the question of about how long it might take for our item to sell given the market circumstances. And to be fair, I don't fully 100% understand method 2. I have learned method 1 and have used that, and it has gotten me this far, and I'm pretty pleased with the results. So I can speak more on method 1, and if other people are understanding method 2 and like they're experts with method 2, feel free to educate us on that.
So you don't know the material? That's what you're saying. Before you saying that I'm being too harsh, I want to remind you that in the description of every single one of her videos, she is asking people to join her workshop for $25 a month. You are charging people while you don't understand the material and you don't know what you're talking about. I want to say at this point, if you are still defending these people, you are being willfully blind now, because this isn't even about disagreeing anymore. There's nothing for me to disagree here. She doesn't actually know the material to the point where you're going to pause the video and ask the audience if somebody can explain it to you. Look at the title of this video, right? I already knew it was a joke the moment that I found it. How this one thing made me a top 0.01% eBay seller, and I'll teach you. You don't know the material, but you're going to teach us anyways. And this is what the top elite 1% of the 1% on eBay looks like. This is what the top sellers really look like, the 1% of the 1%, really. I make these videos because my empathy and my loyalty lies within the viewers. I care very much about the viewers who come into this space and try to learn this stuff, thinking that they're going to be taught something useful, when the truth is these people are just faking it until they make it. The more they speak, the more they out themselves for not actually knowing the material at all. And in this particular case, he just openly admits it. How egregious can you be? Okay, look at some of the comments down here, right? Very kind of you to help others with your experience. I love these types of videos. STR are so critical. Great content, Carrie. You rock, etc., etc. People don't know any better here. And these gurus, they know that the people who come into this space are mostly beginners. This is what I'm talking about, right? So I want you to hear her stock analogy of what she thinks STR is. Just bear with me here and I'll explain exactly why this analogy is just not what a business professional would say.
Now, why is sell-through rate so helpful? It takes a very loose approach of sourcing and gives you structure and boundaries to make your sourcing go easier. It shows the proven track record of any given item. I like to view the sell-through rate track record of an item kind of like your normal investments, where you look at the performance of that stock before you invest your money into it to see what its track record is. And it shows you if it is a healthy market or an unhealthy market, and about how quickly.
Tell me you don't own stocks without telling me you don't own stocks. Nobody looks at a stock this way, okay? That's not... Everybody looks at a stock on a graph. And what is a graph? It's a lot of points plotted up and down, go over a given period of time. But what she's saying with her STR method, number one, you don't understand what STR means. And that's why you're saying it the way that you're saying it. You're force fitting this definition into a performance metric when STR itself is not a performance metric, okay? It's part of a performance metric, but it's not an actual performance metric. You want the STR snapshot of every single day for 90 days in a row and then plot them all out so that you get a line graph that's going to curve up or down so that you know if something is improving or it's declining or it is stagnant. All right. So if I were to say to you, hey, you know that Apple sells about 200 million iPhones every single year. You say, wow, that's a lot of iPhones. And then if I ask you, is that good or bad for Apple? Like, is that a lot for them? You don't know that it doesn't tell you anything because you're not supposed to compare one period to just itself because you're just not comparing anything at all. It's just one apple to one apple by itself. There's nothing to compare here. So how do you know if we're doing good or if we're doing bad? So when we go ahead and we do a Google search of how many iPhones were sold in each year, you get a result over here. It says in 2024, 232.1 million iPhones were sold. Now, from 2019, 191 million was sold. And then we jump in 2021 to 242 million. To today, where 232.1 million were sold. So we actually lost 10 million sales. So you could see the jump in 2019 and then the loss of 10 million sales down to, you see what I'm saying? There's a roller coaster that you could see if something is trending up or trending down. And that's how you make your stock predictions. What does this have to do with a snapshot of just one 90-day period, looking at just one 90-day period? I first want to say that I hope that people appreciate the fact that you need about 3 to 5 times the amount of energy to debunk and correct something for people as opposed to just put stuff out and fake it till you make it, okay? So this is very difficult to do because there's so many things wrong with what she said. There's so many aspects that I have to correct for you guys so that you fully understand the concept. Plus why she's wrong. Okay. So number one, she does say in the beginning of this video specifically what the definition of STR is, and she does get that correctly. But what makes this whole lesson crazy is that once she starts to, explain her method 1 and method 2, that's not what STR is. So it's kind of like you just read the definition, but you didn't even understand what the definition is. So first, we all know that STR is a static number of how many you started with versus how many you are left over a given period of time. So if we were to force fit that definition into what she's talking about, it would definitely be method 2. Why? Because all of the listings that sold used to be a listing. So therefore, you have to add 100 plus 100 and then divide it by the 100 listings that are still available and left over. And therefore, you will get 50%. When you do this, you will always get a number under 100%, because if you get a number over 100%, that would suggest that you sold more than what you had in existence, making it impossible. That's why it's a logical fallacy to get a number more than 100%. And in reseller math, you are always getting numbers above 100% the moment you have a lot sold versus just a few listed. So what's actually happening, what she's saying is that how many have sold over a period of time versus the current sea of competition. So for that reason, you should stop calling this the STR method and just coin it a different term, because you're explaining something completely different. So if we were to sell, right, like a cupcake or something. So there's 500 cupcakes that were sold in 90 days, and then there's 50 listings of cupcakes right now. The difference between this is that those 50 cupcake listings are competing against each other. As opposed to if we had a bake sale where we had, 500 cupcakes, we sold 450 and there's 50 left over. That's just inventory waiting to be sold. And we're just the one seller, not competing with anybody. Those cupcakes are not fighting each other to see who gets sold first. And that's what's happening here. And that's why later on, she makes a disclaimer that, despite all this STR method 1 or whatever, there's still a lot of factors that come into play of your item's condition and what the price you're going to set it at, and did you list it in the proper category, and all that other junk. And this is why these lessons are absolutely nuts. And these people are not business professionals. The more they speak, the more they out themselves for not knowing what they're talking about, because this shouldn't even be labeled as the STR method. This is just a roundabout way of trying to decide, okay, this is how many sold in the past 90 days, and this is the currency of competition right now. And going by that, let me just go ahead and do a rough estimate of what my chances are here. This is also under the assumption that every single listing that you're looking at is a reseller listing that are all one and done items. Many times in a marketplace, there could be like 100 sellers selling stuff, but only the top 10 sellers are the people who are doing the bulk of the sales, especially in the repeatable sales stuff. So when you're in my space, right, where everybody has a replenishable listing competing with each other, we're all brand name versus brand name, you'll find out that, like, if we use a comparison, right, such as like the top camera stuff, Sony and Canon dominate the market in most of the camera sales, right? And then Panasonic, Lumix, Minolta, stuff like that are less of the sales involved. So if you take the whole, full number together and then try to divide it and then say what my chances are, this doesn't make any sense, because you have to fight against Sony and Canon, and that's very, very difficult. You see what I'm saying? So to take this whole number, you're just talking about like reseller versus reseller. And to say this thing, we're trying to fit it into the whole like STR definition of what it actually is. You're trying to say that, like, in the 500 cupcakes, right, in the whole 90 days, the 500 listings is all that existed, and there's only 50 listings left over, as if everybody is getting in some kind of seller queue, and then, I'm in line next to sell something. But that's not true. That's not what's going to happen. Whether your item gets to sell first before another reseller's item gets to sell first is dependent on so many other factors. You see how hard it is to actually debunk something and bring real clarity when people are muddying the waters with this kind of nonsense. This video has gotten over 40,000 views of her teaching this nonsense to people. So this is the part of the video where I found it to be the most unacceptable.
Now we're going to get into a little bit of the equation on how to calculate sell-through rate. And I'm going to keep this as simple as I can, because I know we're not all math people.
What do you mean we're not all math people? This is like claiming to be a battle rapper and you don't know how to freestyle. Claiming to be a firefighter, but you're scared of heights and climbing ladders, right? You're a police officer, but you don't believe in firearms. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Being a business owner is all about making data-driven decisions. And often that form of data comes in math. And if you're not a math person, how are you teaching other people exactly how to be successful? How would you even know you're successful if you don't understand the math? The biggest red flag for me in this space is often I come across all these videos and I notice that they're all not very good at math. They'll say things, throw out numbers, and they make no sense whatsoever. And I'm going to show you a whole bunch of examples of that right now.
I've sold over 33,000 items on eBay. I have done $400,000+ in sales.
465,000 of 33,000 sold would only equal an ASP of $14. And this is before taxes and shipping removed.
For me, is my average cost of goods is $4. Mm-hmm. My average sale price is $25. Mm-hmm. Solid 10 years of my business, I was a lone wolf, head down, didn't really talk to anybody, didn't mess with anybody, didn't cause any problems, just went about my business, did my business, built my business. And in 2019, still solo, doing 120 listings every single day, the business did $1.2 million.
I see. So let's take a moment to crunch those numbers. 120 a day by 30 days, that's 3,600 listed. At 1.2 million a year, that's about 100K per month. So at a $25 ASP, that would be 4,000 orders per month. So we're looking at an STR rate of 111%.
Amazing. Amazing.
So this is what we're going to listen to together. She's trying to instill confidence and empower her listeners, but you have to pay attention to the math.
Confidence grew and my sales grew. And from that point on, my reselling career took off. From there, my store was turning over quarter after quarter. 600 listings were going up and 600 orders were going out every 90 days. And I just kept climbing. Today, I'm listing 1,600 items with over 1,800 orders going out every.
Okay, so clearly she doesn't mean that she's sourcing 16 and then selling 18, because that would mean that you are selling more than what you have that exists, right? So clearly it means that she is sourcing 16 every 30 days while selling 18 every 90 days. So if we go ahead and then take the 1,800, okay, and then divide it into the 4,800, which is what she sources, right? And then we hit the percentage. This is 37.5% over here, okay? So the question is, what happened to the other 3,000 that rolls over? Are you going to keep continuing to source 1,600 every 30 days just to sell 18 every 90 days? That means that you will be accruing another 3,000 unsold inventory every single quarter, giving you 12,000 unsold items by the end of the year. Just like when she started with like 600 in and 600 out. I hope this is not what's actually happening, right? That you are sourcing 600 every 30 days, but only selling 600 every 90 days, because you would still be accruing 1,200 units every quarter. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Now, I hope that's not what's happening, but the problem is that that's what you're saying to people, and people in the comments are not crunching the numbers and they're just smiling and nodding along. Now, luckily, there's a comment right here by Retro Obscurity. It says, method 2 makes more sense to me. Anything sold within 90 days was also active within 90 days. So if there are 100 active and 100 sold, 200 were active within the last 90 days. Only 50% of the active listings sold. Good. He gets it. He was very kind with his words by saying that's what makes more sense to me, when truthfully, that's the only way the logic actually works. So it's not even a matter of opinion. It's all about, do you even understand what is happening in your business? So kudos to him and the 2 guys who agreed, as well as all of the 29 thumbs up who understood the assignment. So for this particular episode, I decided to put in a special segment dedicated to business math. I highly dislike it when people claim to be business professionals, yet they're not very good at math. And they're going to use high school-ish type excuses to say, well, you know, some of us are not math people. That is complete nonsense. If you're going to get into this for the long run, you are going to be bombarded with decision making every single day. And all of that data is going to be math-based. So there's no excuse for this whatsoever. For that reason, I put up a poll on my page, and I thank every single one of my subscribers who checks out my polls and participates in them, because it really helps me to make better content. So for today's question, the poll was, say you made 50 bucks on eBay and they take away a fee of 13%. Now, we all know right off the top of our heads, that's $6.50, leaving us with $43.50 left over. But the question of the day is, how would you perform this on a calculator, and what way was taught to you? So you can see the answers over here with 60 plus people participating. Most of you guys have said that it's 50 times 1.3, it equals 6.5. So therefore, when you minus 6.5, et cetera, right? So you'd be surprised at how many other ways people were thinking about. Now, one of the comments that I was pleasantly surprised with is what Heather Thomas had to say. So 13% of 100 is $13, but 50 is half of 100, and half of 13 is 6.5. I tend to go by tens if it's not a clean 50% or 75%. So for 13%, I tend to think $1.30 for every $10. I was a waitress for years, so I tend to figure percentages the latter way. I like this comment very, very much because it corroborates what you're saying, right? You claim to be a waitress and then you say something that totally makes sense with what your profession is. And that is why we have to have our lesson today. So we're going to do a brief business math course here. And the questions is for anybody who says things like, oh, I'm just not a math person. It is designed to make you very uncomfortable, okay? But we're going to do stuff with the calculator, and it's all going to make sense so that the math, you'll no longer want to shy away from it because it's going to be so simple. So let's take the first scenario, and it's going to get progressively more difficult, okay? So your average first scenario is always about going to a restaurant and then getting the check. So let's say the check is $50 over here, right? And then we want to leave a 15% tip. So what do we do here? You would just go ahead and then multiply this by 15 and then hit the percentage button. That would give you 7.5. Okay. Now from here, you just add plus and then equals, and then it will add that tip back to the total, giving you 57.50. Or if you wanted the answer directly, you would just go ahead and take $50 and then add the 15% equals. There you go. Okay. So the reason why we do it this way is because generally what happens is that people do it the mental decimal way, right? Which is taking the $50 and then multiplying it by 1.15 equals, right? Giving you 57.5. But rather than to do something like that, it would just be so much easier if we just said we have a $50 check and we need to add 15% to it. You see what I'm saying? So once you start thinking and acting like this, you won't forget it. So let's do the same idea with like either a discount or some kind of a commission that is a removal of a percentage. So we're walking on the street and we see some shoes in the glass, right? And it goes for, again, $50. And there is a sale today for, let's say, 27% off. So what do we do here? We multiply this by 27% to give us $13.50 discount. And then we push the minus and then equals. That would give us, with the 27% discount on top of the $50, leaving us $36.50. And again, if you just wanted the answer straight, then you would go $50 over here and then minus the, what did I say, 27%? There you go, $36.50. Okay. So now let's get into something just a little bit more complicated. Okay, this is just a little joke to make fun of. Let's say we were bank robbers. Okay, I'm gonna rob the bank. You're gonna drive the getaway vehicle. Okay, so I feel as if I'm taking on more risk here. So we're going to divide this 70-30. So let's say we end up with a heist of like $200,000, right? So $200,000 over here, and then if I multiply by 30%, which is your cut, bam. This is exactly how much I should be giving you, okay? So the next question is going to be much, much more difficult, right? Let's say we're standing at a Sam's Club, right? And then at the Sam's Club, it turns out that our membership is almost expiring. So the lady behind the counter says, would you like to renew your membership? We say, yeah, okay, cool. Would you like to upgrade to the Plus membership? We're like, well, what's the Plus membership all about? Okay, it's $60 extra, and then you get an extra 2% cash back. So the question now is, how much do we have to spend at Sam's Club for the year in order to justify the $60 at a 2% rate? So what you would do here is actually take the 60, right, and then divide it by 2 and then hit the percentage, and that will give you $3,000. The answer is $3,000. What we're actually doing here is trying to find what would be the whole number where $60 would be 2% of. So once you have these kinds of skills in your back pocket, then the whole math and whatever is a lot easier, and you don't have to shy away from stuff. Basically, whatever you're trying to do all the time, right, is that, look, if eBay is going to take a certain percentage away and we have to pay tax, et cetera, right? So let's suppose we make the sale of $50 and then we mail it to somewhere where the tax is about 5.5%. So we would add 5.5% to this, but then eBay is going to take away 13.25% from us. So then over here, we would just go ahead and minus 13.25%. There you go. You get your final answer like this. So once you put it in this motion, right, the way we speak and the way that we're clicking on the calculator all make sense together. So I'm going to come back up top and then we're going to do one more mental math together, and that will conclude the lesson. So I want to give you guys a little tip that would be based on one of my personal war stories of this is how I would deal with vendors at a trade show when trying to negotiate prices. So essentially, I'll be walking around the trade show until I see something interesting. And then I would approach the vendor and say, hey, I like this item very much. And then we would shoot the breeze about it for a little bit until I finally get to the question of, so how much for this item? So the vendor might say to me like $4.85. Now, for the sake of simple math, I'm going to keep the numbers a lot lower here. And I say to him, okay, well, how many do I have to buy in order to get the next tier of discount? And he'll say, well, you got to take at least like 500 units. I'm like, I see. And how much at 500 units? And he'll say, I could do 435. I'm like, cool. Okay. But see, here's the thing. I'm new to this item. I really want to try it. And can you kind of meet me at 400 units for $4.35? Now, because I didn't hit him that bad, right? He'll think about it and then he'll say, all right, you know what? For the first time, your first order, we'll do 400 units at $4.35. Great. Now, here comes the mental math part. How much did we actually save here? Well, quickly in your mind, you should be thinking that $4.85 minus $4.35 equals 50 cents. 50 cents multiplied by 400 units, that would be $200. We saved $200 here, right? This is what I'm talking about. If you are a business professional, you are very, very, very quick with the mental math because this kind of stuff happens to you all the time. And you have to speak like this because that's how the other person knows that you are also sharp and you're not bullied in a lot of these kinds of situations, right? So if you were a compu nerd, you would be very quick with the RAM numbers as well, right? Like 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256. Like you would just keep going like that because you know this stuff off of the top of your head. And that's how you know that like somebody is just not who they claim to be because the stuff that they say don't align. So I'm just going to touch on this topic one last time because this particular video I thought was very, very important. Now, we can't dwell on stuff forever and the topic is starting to get old and there's a lot more important things to cover. But I really, really love what Yumbo had to say here because more and more creators are now making content that holds their own industry accountable, which is what happens in the accounting industry, in the, you know, lawyers, doctors, like every single other YouTube genre category. There are people who disagree, debunk free speech, sharing the ideas and trying to put out the right truth about stuff. So this review was actually very important. I felt as if everything that he had to say in the last 2 minutes was key.
He said it will make less mistakes than you've made in your eBay career. That's what he said, which is just not true. And I do, like, a lot of people don't like tech and sports. I personally like him. I can't verify that, you know, a lot of his claims are true.
That seems to be the general consensus. Like a lot of people who come out and defend him, ultimately, at the end of the day, once they're pressed on the questions, they really can't confirm anything that they know is true or not.
But I learned a lot from him. I learned everything you could learn from him, and then I left. Some people stick around in that group forever, and I don't really understand the point of that. Because he pretty much says the same things over and over again.
Look, I'm on week like 396 talking about the same thing every week, just in a different way. Right. I have come up with 395 previous ways to say the same thing. And you don't have to have a new thing to talk about.
So at the end of the video, Yumbo explains that all of this stuff actually goes against the mantra, basically everything that he has learned from him in the past. Now, granted, he said that he has learned stuff from him in the past, but that's exactly how all of this works. People can't just lie 100% of the time. You would never believe them from the get-go. They would never have a following all the way from the beginning if they just said the sky is red and just lied, right? So you can't do 100% lies all the time. But this is exactly why the last few videos that I made specifically called out the fact that his advice at the end started to get really strange. Why would you start telling people to start scaling in volume now? This is how, like, my criticism and Yumbo's criticism actually corroborates. This is what I'm talking about. At the end of the day, when people are talking, you know who's saying stuff that adds up and who's saying things that don't add up, as well as try to put out $25 a month workshop classes for not knowing the actual material. Anyways, guys, be careful out there. That was the video. If you enjoyed that, please give it a big like. And if you learned something, please consider subscribing. As always, I'll see you guys in the next. Take care. All right, guys, time for a little bit of final thoughts. So at the end of the video, Yumbo does go on to say that all of this stuff ends up going against the mantra, meaning that it is against everything that he has learned in the past. So granted, if you are a beginner and you want to learn the basics, yes, you could pretty much pick it up from anyone, including these gurus. But I would also argue that you could pick it up from anybody else who has been doing this seriously from anywhere between 6 months to a year. So that being said, these people are not the business professionals that they claim that they are, because once they start speaking beyond the basic stuff, that's where everybody starts to notice that it is all just surface level knowledge and they're just saying the same things over and over again, right? And all of the things that they do tell you is pretty much common sense things like be consistent and have goals and proper usage of your storage spaces, as if you're going to be wasting your closet or wasting your storage space. You should lower the cost of goods, as if you're intentionally paying more for your cost of goods. None of that stuff actually makes any sense. And when they don't have that stuff, then they put out another motivational speech. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this is all about selling courses, getting people to join groups, and paying monthly subscriptions. It is dangerous for beginners out there, and I think Yumbo is excellent for putting out this review because he is helping the community by holding it accountable to itself. I know this video could not have been easy for him to make because ultimately Tech used to be his mentor because he used to be part of his group. So I think it is excellent. I think it is very brave. It is a wonderful thing of what Yumbo did. Shout outs to that guy.